Buckle up! Welcome to this Red Zone Alert. I'm Crane. He's the cowboy, Donald Trump. Let's use as many football cliches and analogies as we can. He has methodically moved the ball down the field. He is in the red zone. A lot of time left. Doesn't look like the other team's going to catch him.
Yeah, and I don't think worry about Donald Trump throwing an interception. It's going to be run the ball, and then score.
Well, you know, I guess if there were Las Vegas odds back in June, Trump would not have been the favorite. And I think, Patrick, a lot of us are surprised, especially those of us who grew up in the East Coast where Donald was always there, how he is just kind of mesmerizing the country.
He hit a chord, and the chord was something that was waiting to be struck by the right person. The other candidates are politicians. There's no way they could have done this. It had to come from an outsider. The public's mad. They're mad, but they're also scared. And for the first time in Americans' lives, for a lot of them, it's what's the future going to be, and are we optimistic anymore, or is this it?
You know, what's interesting about Donald Trump, and I think it resonates with a lot of people, it's not just economic, he has cracked the wall of political correctness. And for so many people who dare do it or accidentally did it, they usually lost their jobs or were somehow punished by the left.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the lasting legacies of this campaign, win, lose, or draw in the fall, is that people just hate it. And they feel overwhelmed by it, and they feel like their culture is being overwhelmed by the counterculture that is now almost a mainstream culture. So they're very upset about it. And these are working people. They've been pushed around. They've been told that everything they do is wrong. They've been told they have to accept things culturally that they never would accept in the past, and they have no time to absorb all this stuff. It's like, you will do this, and you're going to accept this tomorrow. By gosh, we're coming after you, and either have transgender bathrooms at Target or not.
You know, what's interesting about Trump to me, he's getting support almost in spite of himself. He's really not a conservative, yet he's getting conservative voters. He's really not an evangelical, married 3 times, but yet he's getting the evangelical vote. He's not a politician. He has really not mapped out a lot of plans. And he's almost been, not racist, but I mean just basically saying, people coming across the border, they're rapists, they're thugs. We're going to build a wall to keep them out.
Yeah. In fact, I was thinking the other day, he's like Julius Caesar in the sense of when Caesar was coming to power, the Roman Senate and the government was run by a bunch of, like the 5 families, like the mob. Mm-hmm. And so Caesar comes in, and he was really a champion of the poor people. And you go, well, gosh, Caesar was wealthy, and he was a conqueror. How come the poor people went for a wealthy guy? Because he was telling them, you're getting screwed by the government, and I'm here to take you away from that. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to lead Rome. And he wanted to be dictator, and he was dictator. Well, all of a sudden, the guys in the Senate and, the establishment of the day says, no, we're going to get rid of you, Caesar, and they killed him. Now, that's not going to happen with Trump, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to finish him off. Only right now, he's defying everything they've done, and he's going to survive.
Now, I do not want to make an odious comparison, but from a historical perspective, Hitler, Mussolini, didn't they come along at this kind of a time in their respective histories? Yeah.
I mean, the 1930s was a volatile period. And the funny thing is, Hitler was an admirer of Mussolini because Mussolini came first in the 20s, and he was more successful in the beginning. And then the roles got reversed, But yeah, I mean, he's a strong man, which is very unusual for America. We don't usually look for strong men. We don't look for men in the white horse. We understand it's a tough job, and we understand that we're a democracy or we're a republic is what we're supposed to be. But this is pretty unique. I think a lot of Americans are so fed up. They're saying, I'd rather give it to a guy like this who acts more like a dictator than the politicians that have been screwing things up.
Now, we're coming to you late in April ahead of the primary in Indiana. So things could change. But as it stands now, and sources are telling us in Indiana that Trump is probably going to do very well. There's no polling allowed legally in Indiana, so he can't say he's got a 10% margin or a 15% margin. Ted Cruz has put Carly Fiorina on his ticket, if there is a ticket. People here in California are saying, well, he's sort of pandering. He wants the female vote, and he wants somebody who's known in California, which Carly is, even though she doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah, and they call it a Hail Mary pass, Hail Carly, whatever it is. You're at the point of the campaign where you're throwing everything you can at the opposition, understanding that it's got a steamroller effect, and how do you really stop it? The other thing is, so let's say he's short of delegates by 50 or whatever, even 100. Marco Rubio's got 171. Kasich has delegates. The guy who's really in the driver's seat to me is Marco more than Kasich, because Trump doesn't like Kasich. And he could be the guy to be the kingmaker. But at this point, we're almost there. You can't deny the guy. This idea you're going to stop in the convention, all this second ballot stuff, contest the convention, that might be nice theater for all the media people who are drooling over the fact to watch people fight on the floor. But as I was saying to you earlier, I think what's going to happen, the Republican race is going to start to settle down, and then the FBI is going to come in and do something. All of a sudden, the Democratic race, the focus is going to shift, which is not good for them. If it stays on Trump and he makes gaffes or whatever, that hurts him. But if the focus all of a sudden shifts the other way, Trump gets to go around the country, making new friends, consolidating his stuff, giving more speeches of substance like he did the other day. All of a sudden, the dynamic changes. And quite frankly, there's enough of those angry people out there. Somebody said, well, there's not enough angry white males out there. But it's not just angry white males. There's angry blacks out there who are saying, wait, we've been with you guys for 50 years and we're still getting hosed.
And we saw statistics that the big jump in the suicide rate and the biggest contingent of people taking their own lives, middle-aged women.
Yeah, and working class women, because they see no way out. I mean, as we were talking before, recessions are they go bounce and they bounce. But in this case, people feel like I'm stuck. They can't breathe, and they're drowning. Now, some people have turned to alcohol, and they've turned to other ways to medicate themselves rather than facing the world that's out there. But you can't blame them in some ways, because there's nowhere for them to go.
Hope springs eternal, and a lot of people are hoping Donald Trump could be the answer. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. There's a lot of politicking left. But consider this, Patrick. How can Trump right the ship? There aren't that many jobs. We don't have manufacturing jobs because we just are not manufacturing things, and we have automation in a lot of places, automation in fast food, automation on the assembly lines. Where are the good-paying jobs going to be?
Well, the problem is we might be in a little bit of a trough right now where you're not going to be able to create those jobs right away. The idea that you're going to all of a sudden start building steel mills again, is a little disingenuous, especially in those states up in the upper Midwest that still have strong unions. When Trump sometimes says, oh, look what happened to the auto industry. Yeah, look what happened to the auto industry in Michigan. The auto industry in Tennessee is doing just fine. The auto industry in South Carolina is doing just fine. It's in the old legacy states, if you will.
Well, right-to-work states.
Right.
Are
Sure.
Detroit and Ohio going to get on board?
Yeah, I mean, so that's going to be that might be the next phase. Who knows? Maybe Trump says we got to get rid of all this stuff. So there's more people who are in unions for public employees now than there are in unions for trades and things like that. And look at the coal miners. How do you keep the coal miners voting Democratic when it's the Democrats that want to take their jobs? So now you've got West Virginia, which probably goes Republican anyways, but look at Ohio, all that southern Ohio that borders Kentucky, southern Illinois where they've got coal mines, Wyoming, which is already Republican, but in that Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Illinois area, there's a lot of folks out there who aren't going to get their jobs back, and the Democrats are telling them, well, we're going to retrain you.
It may be time, and Donald Trump may seize this, to sort of relook at everything. Maybe if you loosen regulations, you have more people working, more people will take a chance on businesses. If credit gets loosened, people might take a chance. And you also have to think, what do we need in this country? We need to rebuild the military, we need more hardware, and we need to work on our infrastructure. These are not menial jobs, you need skilled people, but these are not the college graduates we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're finally getting away from this ridiculous idea that everybody's supposed to go to college. For what? To get a degree in ethnic studies? There ain't any jobs out there for that kind of work. And also the universities aren't teaching the most critical thing they're supposed to do, which is critical thinking. So I think, he might be able to open up a new bunch, new different avenue for creating some more jobs. We're not going to make shoes. We're not going to make, cheap jackets that we sell at Walmart. That's just not going to happen.
This website is really all about the Constitution, all about liberty and freedom. And Trump is sending a signal, perhaps, and certainly the way he's resonating with the voters, we're hearing the signal, that maybe it is time to get back to basics. That why are we doing so many things as a country to hamper freedom, to hamper free enterprise, to hamper the pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, and he says he's for fair trade, not free trade, and he wants to renegotiate trade deals. But he's a deal maker. But the funny thing about deals is you got to have somebody willing partner on the other side. And if they like the trade deal, why are they going to sit down and renegotiate?
Well, what is fair trade? If Apple is making phones in China for $20 and selling them here for $600, or the Chinese are making coats for $9 and selling them to us for $30, how do we level that playing field?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a trade expert, but I got to tell you, it's not as simple as they think it is. It's the same with like the Iranian deal. So you're going to renegotiate. Why would they want to renegotiate, number one? The other thing is, remember you got the Europeans in there too. The Europeans are now, there's shuttles going between the European capitals and Tehran airport. There, remember when they first did the Iranian nuclear deal, all of a sudden all these companies started announcing big deals with Tehran. So all of a sudden you're going to tell the Europeans, we're going to we're ripping this thing up, and we're going back to the status quo before. Whoa, time out. No, we're not. We're making cash here, boy. So forget all your stuff. We don't care about the nukes. I mean, the Europeans don't care if Iran has a nuke. They trust them that
Israel does.
Yeah, but they trust the Iranians. It's like they trust, you trusted the Germans during World War II, that they're not going to invade you. But, these guys their mission is a lot different. But the Europeans, they don't care. They're going to sell their souls, as Lenin once said. We don't have to worry about the capitalists. They'll sell us a rope by which we will hang them. And that's what the Iranians are doing.
This is the Red Zone Alert. Ed Crane and Patrick Doranson. We're talking politics, we're talking the economy, all sorts of things going on in this country. And Patrick, you've been in politics a long time. I've been in the news business a long time. And I think collectively, we have never seen a run-up to a presidential election quite like this. I've never seen so many voters engage one way or the other.
Yep. And I think part of that is because of their fear. And a lot of people are looking at this is our last chance. This is the last best hope. And everybody goes, no, there'll always be another day. Yeah, there'll always be another day, but we're continuing to go down this road of using the Constitution as a doormat. You got a president using executive
suggestions.
Yeah, right. And you have a president who has defied Congress on many respects, and you have a Congress that over the years has given away their power. And they don't exercise the power that they do have. So we're going through a constitutional crisis. We have a political crisis in our country. With our political parties, the brick and mortar political parties are starting to crumble. We have a whole new way of communicating that we didn't have in previous campaigns. And you add all this stuff together and there's your volatility.
Getting a haircut last night. Talking to the lady cutting my hair, young lady, said, yeah, you got a horse in this race? You got a presidential candidate? She goes, I don't vote. Why don't you vote? I just don't. It's just, nothing changes. And I said, well, if you don't vote, you can't complain, but she will anyway. But, how strong is this whole millennial vote we talk about?
Well, they're very strong in the primaries. Young people did support President Obama. The fact that Bernie's taken a lot of them tells me that they aren't satisfied with their vote for President Obama. And I always say to them, welcome to life. I mean, you're going to make a lot of votes that you don't like in the future. But are they going to vote in the general? They don't like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is...
Well, they didn't grow up with her.
Yeah, she's a baby boomer, old baby boomer. Now everybody goes, well, but Bernie's 74. Yeah, but Bernie's like their college professors who are telling...
Bernie's got goodies. Hey, he's like Santa Claus.
Yeah, and he comes to him, he says, you should be getting your free college because free college should be for everybody, right?
There's no such thing as free. Somebody's paying for it.
Yeah, of course, but they don't know that. They think somebody else is going to pay. And when you ask them, what do they say? Well, 1%'s going to pay for it. Oh, well, of course they're going to pay for it. And again, I think he's like one of their professors. And they trust him more than they trust their own. And Hillary's like one of their parents. and we're grandparents, and you should be doing this, and here's what we're going to do. And Bernie's saying, you're getting hosed by these people. So I can see why he's doing it, but will they vote in a general? That's a big question. And will they vote for her?
The biggest obstacle that I think Trump faces, anybody who's trying to change things, and this is something that the founders had really no conception of, and that is this entitlement mentality. There are so many government goodies, some of them well-intended, Social Security, disability payments. But what do we have? More than 50 million or close to 50 million people on food stamps now?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you get used to this kind of cradle to grave coverage, and somehow you have to break out of that syndrome for free enterprise and liberty to take effect.
But the problem is we got a Democratic Party that is heading into real socialism. They want to get as many people once they get to over 50% of people on some kind of form of government assistance, they figure that's the holy grail that's going to deliver election after election after election. Because they look what happens in Europe. Every now and then the conservative government will pop up, right? But what happens most of the time? You always have high unemployment in Europe. You always have people that are on some kind of assistance. You got all these things that are supposed to be free, like healthcare, that aren't free. So look at there's no growth. I mean, it just kind of bounces along. And if that's America's future, that's a pretty dismal future.
It's interesting. This is a time period where good folks like you are on our website and probably going to a lot of different websites to get your information, to get some perspective. The world is changing, and you really think you get a sense that the whole political system is going to change, and that maybe Barack Obama is one who brought it down, along with Congress, because he has just gone willy-nilly with these executive orders. Growth is at 0.5%. He's doing what he wants, but is it in the best interest of the country? We've lost great allies, or at least our relationships with the likes of Israel, the likes of Britain. He, writes a blank check pretty much for Iran. He lets Putin go unchecked. These are big problems.
The Western democracies are facing a crisis of confidence that their governments, the people in these countries, the EU, United States, maybe a little bit in Canada, certainly in Mexico, they're looking around and they're saying, these guys can't solve, the problems are so intractable they can't solve them, or they're so busy buying each other off and giving favors to each other, they can't get their handles on how to fix this thing. Look what happens. You talk about Social Security, it's still the third rail, because what happened? Paul Ryan talked about it, and and even Donald Trump, we're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to have higher growth. But that's not how you refill the Social Security bucket. You got to do something drastic, because, again, it was made for people who weren't going to live very long in the 30s, and now we got people living into their 80s, and you got people living into their 90s, and who knows, we're the millennial generation. They might live into their hundreds, given technology. That's
a great point. And I was chatting with somebody yesterday about the job situation. And somebody wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times saying, Donald Trump could talk all he wants, but let's be realistic. Where are these jobs going to come from? And it's not just a question of jobs now, but as you mentioned, people are living longer. 65 is no longer the retirement age unless you can really save money. And even if you are very disciplined in putting money away, what kind of return are you getting? The stock market has slowed down, and you're getting very low single digits. It's really a can of worms. And the U.S. seems to get itself out of a lot of jams from time to time. But it just seems like everything has changed. The jobs aren't there. I heard today that we finally finished paying off our taxes, right, 4 months into the year. And something like 33% is when you take the state, the federal, and local taxes. That's what we paid. $9 trillion. Now, there's a $21 trillion debt. So even if you use that to retire the debt, it would take you years. But with growth at 0.5% and people paying 33% of their income to some sort of tax, those numbers don't meet.
Now, let's add something else into the mix here with these young folks and the future, all of our financial obligations. They're going to live longer. They're going to have to work longer. They're going to have to save more because they're going to live longer if they want to retire ever. But they can't get jobs now in their 30s.
Right. So that savings pool is gone.
At the time, you get out of college 21, you get your first few jobs as we did, and then all of a sudden you get to a certain point, you're in your 30s, you should start being in that thing where I'm putting away a good chunk, whether it's an IRA or whatever else. You're putting away money, realizing that you want to retire at some point, you want to enjoy yourself. They're not even to the first hurdle. Some of them got their first jobs out of college. So how are they going to save? How are they going to make sure that they can buy a house and all that other stuff? Add into that all the fact that all this government debt, and what do we have? 3% interest rates? If the interest rates move 1%, once the Fed decides that, they're not going to float all this money to Wall Street anymore, what's going to happen? The interest on our debt's going to go up. So not only are these people not working, so they're not putting into the Social Security funds or any of the tax funds, at the same time, your debt costs are going to go through the roof. Now, if 80% of the budget is financing the debt, defense, and entitlements,
Not much left.
not much left.
So you go into debt. So let's talk a little bit about this economy that Trump or Hillary or whoever faces. All the sexy, profitable companies now, Apple slowing down, Intel cutting jobs, the automakers having problems. Those things go in cycles. Power companies, of course, oil prices are down, and that's good news for those of us who have to fill up our tanks, but bad news for the industry that relies on petroleum, whether it's looking for oil or oil servicing or whatever.
Yep. And the answer to these problems is there's simplistic solutions. And the one thing that, Donald's coming in, he's going to take care of it. And that's the white horse, the people are willing to give up, I'll give up a little of my freedom if that kind of stuff, if he's going to fix things. Hillary's coming in and saying she's going to fix it too, but she's going to fix it by, playing class warfare. Nobody's coming in and being, you don't want to be the skunk at the garden party because you want people to vote for you, but somebody's got to come in and say, look, folks, here's the deal. These things are going to take a long time, and there is no easy solution. I can't do it all in 4 years, and if you expect that to happen, you're delusional. We're not going to get out of this thing overnight, and I can't snap my fingers. The people of this country have had a little too much, trusting in the government and not trusting in themselves enough, and quite frankly, for years being like that young woman who says, it doesn't matter who I care, I don't want to vote. Yeah, but that's when you get what you get.
Well, it's almost like, your family put you through a good high school, maybe in college, and now, okay, you got your degree, have a nice life. Now, most parents aren't that way, but the message is very clear. You are on your own now. And I think the country is sort of looking at that, almost like, hey, Uncle Sam has got to stop paying the bills. Mm-hmm. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, but what Ronald Reagan did, and whether you liked him or didn't, it worked. He cut taxes, and that spurred the economy, and the growth rate at the height under Reagan was 7%. It's now less than 1% under Obama. So you need that combination of a tax cut to spur incentive and a government cut.
Right.
If you go home and you open the credit card bills and you're in debt, you're going to sit down with your wife and you're going to say, hey, we got to cut this. Maybe we don't go out to dinner. Maybe you don't buy that new dress, etc. The government's got to do the same thing.
Exactly. And that's what Goldwater said 50 years ago in his book, Conscience of a Conservative. He says, look, I'm all for tax cuts. But if you don't have the same amount or more in spending cuts, all you're doing is creating a deficit, which will go into debt at some point. So it's nice to cut taxes, but it's what Reagan, remember he cut taxes, and he thought he had an agreement with Congress to cut spending, and they just said, well, we're not going to cut the spending. So when they blame him, look what happened, we had more deficits. Yeah, because you guys didn't hold up your end of the bargain. It's the same when Reagan made the deal on, amnesty and immigration in '86. They were going to secure the border. He says, okay, I'll let these people stay, but you got to secure that border, Congress. Oh, yeah, forget that.
It's almost like the community that doesn't want an oil refinery in its backyard because it's going to smell bad. There's this NIMBY thing going on in Washington. We'll cut this program or that, but don't cut my program.
Yeah.
And the Democrats do not want to cut social programs because that's where the votes are.
Sure.
Governor McAuliffe in Virginia now letting felons get out of jail vote. That has been anathema for a couple hundred years.
Yep. But they're trying, when you have no ideas, what do you have to do? You got to pad the voting rolls.
Keep your power base.
Well, you got to pad the rolls. And Republicans should look at that. One thing McAuliffe said, he goes, Republicans ought to go out and fight for these votes. And in a way, I agree with him, in the sense of Republicans, and I don't know if it's part of the old country club mentality or whatever, they don't know how to go talk to people of, I hate the term, people of color. They don't. They talk about Latinos. Well, here's their theory. Latinos are more conservative. Latinos are family oriented. They don't like abortion. A lot of them are, Catholics or Christians who are very traditional. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, when you're starting to call their relatives rapists and murderers, or they're, people of the same ethnic group, it stings. It's the same when the Republicans would talk about the Irish in the old days, and the Irish for generations became Democrats because the other party we don't need you people. Why do we need you people?
Right. And it was the party of the working.
Sure, and they were the party of the upper classes. So yeah,
and in the big cities, they controlled the jobs.
Exactly. So, and it's the same with black Americans. Okay, well, they're conservative and they're this, and look what they helped us on Prop 8. And I say to myself, no. No more studies about how you attract minority voters. You know how you attract them? You walk in the room. And if you're Republican, you walk into a room of black voters and you say, you know something? You probably haven't seen many of us around here, and that's on us.
Well,
but you haven't. But you haven't helped. You want something. Where's the deal?
We've had this conversation off air before, and I subscribe to the theory that Mitt Romney would now be the president if he had gone into some black churches, he had gone into some restaurants in the inner city, he had gone anywhere, but country clubs and bastions of white voters, and said, I want to be your president. I want to be the president of all Americans. I want to help you get ahead, and I want to get you off government assistance.
Yeah. And to me, the message should be even more forceful. Trump could deliver this. You've been getting screwed.
But you don't want to play the race card, reverse race card.
I wouldn't play. No, you've been getting screwed because there's a power structure out there, not black or white. It's a liberal power structure with the teachers' unions and all this have stopped voucher programs. They don't like charter schools. They don't like anything because they understand, just like we understand. If you're Republicans, you say we understand. If you're a taxpayer, it's a heck of a lot better than being a tax taker. We don't want people who are being this way. We want to see you uplift yourselves. Not one Republican has ever been able to do that message. In the last campaign in 2012, Condoleezza Rice's speech, everybody should read it, when she talked about school choice as the civil rights issue of our time. And Republicans,
you put a gun to my head and said you can vote for one person for president, I'm voting for Condoleezza Rice. She probably isn't going to be asked. She probably doesn't want it. I think the woman is terrific, but
they don't even listen to her.
There I digress.
Yeah, but they don't listen.
Right. Well, because she is not fitting the mold of what they want an African American woman to say. What she's saying is, you know what? The Constitution didn't get it all done because they treated blacks as 3/5 of a person. We made some mistakes. We made some mistakes in the Deep South, the segregation. But you know what? We're really strong and we're correcting those mistakes. She's not saying you owe us something. She's saying we've gotten past it and there's great opportunities for all. That's why they don't like her.
And again, they don't like her because they have a sweet deal going. It's like when you look at Detroit and all the complaining about Detroit or Flint, Michigan. Well, who's running Detroit and Flint, Michigan? The Democrats. Who's running Oakland? Who's running all these other places? Who's running the state of California? I mean, the Democrats are in such schizophrenia here in California that now they got to argue with each other because the Republicans, there's damn few of them.
So Donald Trump California probably will put him over the top. Do you think all 6 Republicans will vote for Trump?
Yeah, once they have a meeting and have supper down at the Golden Corral, they're going to be fine.
Getting back to the issue of race in America, it seems that the government on one hand is saying equality, 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 but it's doing everything it can to make them unequal with all sorts of programs that affirmative action. It's still around at colleges and some other things, and different ethnic groups don't make it any better. The Black Journalists Association, the Black Machinists Union. If I said to you there's a White Journalists Association meeting, somebody would run me out of town on a rail.
Yeah. It's
the
always,
Black Congressional Caucus.
Yeah, it's always been this dual thing. First of all, I don't like any of these caucuses that are with Women's Caucus, Latino Caucus. I mean, come on, these are just...
They're meetings.
It's identity politics. I mean, if that's what America is going to become, then we're Europeans.
But we talked before we got on the air. Well, why did Cruz take Carly Fiorina as the running mate? And it's ingrained in us. Well, I guess you got a woman on the ticket. I mean, no, you really don't. But we're so, as a nation now, I guess, brainwashed into thinking that we have to have this gender balance, race balance, religious balance in everything we do.
In the old days, there was one way to do, or a couple ways to do it. One, I'm a Southerner. I need a Northerner for geographic balance. Then it got down. Now we're in this phase of, you're right. Oh, do we need? Now we've had the first African American president. All this other stuff. We're looking at this thing through this shallow nature, and we're looking at it through cameras. We're spectators. We're not participants in this thing.
But don't think it's lost on Hillary Clinton that America may still be looking to cross one more barrier, the first woman president.
Of course, and that's what she's counting on.
Because that'll be the first gay president.
Yeah, and we're going to have a nation of first instead of how about a qualified president? And somebody called my radio show, and they said, well, are you against a woman president? And I says, as soon as there's a Margaret Thatcher type on the ballot, I'll be the first one signing up.
Condoleezza Rice.
Yeah, I said, I'll sign up for a lot of women, more than a lot of men. But don't tell me I've got to take Hillary Clinton. Come on, I know her.
Well, somebody could argue that John McCain went down in defeat in part because Sarah Palin was that woman on the ticket. Not that it was a woman on the ticket, but he felt that he had to put a woman on the ticket. Somebody who was attractive, somebody who was different, somebody who may not have been all that well known, and it backfired. Yeah,
it backfired. I mean, they scrambled for that one. They didn't properly vet the situation. But McCain's problem wasn't who he put on the ticket. McCain's problem is he wouldn't take the gloves off against Obama. And he will always be remembered that way.
Well, there's the race thing again. I mean, not people, but I think Romney to an extent was too. He was afraid to get in Obama's face in a debate.
I know, and every time he did, he pulled, it's like you saw him take a swing and he pulls the punch instead of clocking the guy. Right. And then, like, remember Candy Crowley, that one debate, she's defending Obama? He should have gone after, Donald Trump would have reduced her to a puddle. Absolutely reduced her to a puddle. How dare you ask that question, he'd have said. This guy's a liar. That's the one thing people like too, is you look at most of these debates and it's like, where's the Marcus de Queensberry rule book? Trump comes in and says, rule book? Pow!
Right.
Trump's the kind of guy, when they come
to a gunfight?
Yeah, when they come to the middle of the ring, all right, now I want you guys to fight clean. Pow! Whoa! He'll knock you the first time out.
Well, Donald Trump is... I still say this, for most of the country, they're getting Donald Trump. It's still an enigma to me because he's been a Democrat, a Republican, and independent. He loved Barack Obama, he loved Hillary Clinton, now he can't stand him. He calls his colleagues running for president, Little Marco, Lion Ted, I've never seen anybody eat like John Kasich, how much food he can put in his mouth, it's embarrassing. You name it. Carly Fiorina, she doesn't have a very nice face. What about somebody he doesn't like? Or really, when he's going up against a Putin or against an Ayatollah Khomeini or whoever.
Well, I was telling you, I read that column about this guy, Mudcat Sanders. He's a Democratic political consultant in Virginia, and he said he believes Donald Trump is going to, quote, beat Hillary Clinton like a baby seal because of all the working class people, and he lives in Virginia, so he says this ain't going to be a swing state anymore because these people are going to go with Trump. If you look at it, remember, so let's say you're a miner. One miner, how many jobs does a miner support in town? All the other things. So when the mine goes down, just not to the miners, the guy who has the diner, the guy that sells working boots, the guy that sells everything else, all those things are affected by the same thing. So it's expanded. Everybody goes, oh, look at the guy who lost his job. It's more than that. It's everybody who's going to lose their jobs. Now you come out west. And I would hope that the Donald starts looking at some of these public lands issues. The Westerners are getting screwed by the federal government. Stand up to them. And they feel they got a guy who's going to stand up and say this far and no farther.
Now, if you are a Trump backer, if you're a Hillary backer, consider this. Donald Trump got a lot of publicity because Donald Trump was a known quantity in New York. He was colorful, maybe he had some pals in the media. Well, that's over. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CBS, ABC, NBC, maybe even to a lesser extent Fox, they are digging dirt on Donald Trump right now. Donald Trump may seem like an open book. He's had 3 wives. He's done this, that, or the other thing. There's a lot we don't know about Donald Trump. You cannot be as successful in that New York market without stepping on toes, which is why a lot of contractors and developers don't run for president.
Yeah, exactly. And they've been sharpening, and also Media Matters, the George Soros-funded group. They say they've been working on Oppo research against him for a year. There's a lot of stuff there, but
But Hillary Clinton isn't exactly Doris Day or Donna Reed running for president.
Exactly. And the other thing is, a normal candidate folds under this pressure. A normal candidate gets his staff together, as I think I told you one time. Right now, if Donald Trump was a traditional candidate, he'd be investigating himself. He'd have hired people to say, and you pay them money and you say, I want you to do a complete data search on me. Everything that's out there, and lay it out so that we can prepare counterattacks. That's how you would traditionally do it. With him,
or at least how to defend it if you know it's coming.
But then when you play defense in old-fashioned politics, pre-Donald Trump, okay, what's our answer going to be? And we're going to say it this way, and here's how we explain what I did. Donald Trump is that's ridiculous, that's nonsense. I don't know where you get this stuff. That's crap.
Yeah.
He intimidates the reporter.
We're talking about the red zone alert, and we're doing a lot of football analogies. The rest of the field is a Woody Hayes offense, right? Woody Hayes used to say there's three things going to happen when you throw the ball, and two of them are bad. So it's 2 or 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Donald Trump is the California offense. He's the spread. He's throwing that ball, and he's getting completions.
That's right. And he's very nimble. And one of the reasons he can be nimble is, one, the campaign's basically in his head, and he has people that execute what he says. He has people that execute his trips and everything else and his appearances. But other than that, they're not sitting down doing murder boards with him. They're not sitting down saying, okay, Donald, you're going to be going to an interview in the New York Times. We got to take 3 hours out of the schedule to brief you. Brief me on the plane. Or I read the paper this morning.
There's a governor of Louisiana, Edwin Edwards. He had a big lead, and some reporter said to him, "You're going to win." He said, "Well, the only thing that can stop me is if I'm found in bed with a dead girl or a live boy." Now, that's kind of a funny saying, but Donald Trump, he's kind of like Alfred Newman. What, me worry? What are you going to do to this guy? I mean, conservatives are probably anathema with the whole idea of transgender bathrooms. Trump said it's fine. He has been a Democrat, he's been a Republican. He's flip-flopped on abortion, he's flip-flopped on everything. He's called people names, he's been sued, you name it, he's done it. Well, what are you going to get on him? Outside of he murdered someone, I don't see how you're going to embarrass him.
I don't think, to his core followers, no. And also, his core followers, they're looking for revenge. They feel they've been hosed the last more than 8 years, pre-Obama, because of what's happened in the culture. They see their own politicians caving to political correctness. They see nobody standing up for them. They feel cornered. They feel like, my life is over. I'm 55 years old. I lost the great job I had back in '08, and I haven't worked since. They want blood. They're looking for revenge. Not so much, they're not as interested in, and that's why all these other candidates have failed. They're coming in saying, I have a 10-point plan that's going to make sure we can do X, Y, and Z. And people go,
Trump says, I'm going to make America great. I'm going to build a wall. They don't want specifics.
No, they don't. They want to hang people. If they could see a politician hanging from every lamppost when they drive to work, they'd be very pleased.
Well, let's finish up with a couple of scenarios and give you our take on how they may play out. Right now, with this groundswell of support that Trump has, if he gets there with 1,220 delegates and he needs 17 more, there is going to be, not quite literally rioting in the streets, but a lot of unhappy people from Cleveland to California.
Yeah, and I'm starting to agree with Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign guy, that they're gonna have him before they get there. And as we were talking, I think this thing's all going to switch over to the focus is going to be on the Democratic race. If Donald Trump, and let's say he wins Indiana, and then all of a sudden, Nebraska falls, all the dominoes start to fall, Cruz is going to be sitting at the Alamo in California, hoping that he can survive, and he won't. But if they imagine if they settle the nomination on the Republican side, and all of a sudden, the gospel, according to James Comey, the FBI comes out and they decide to criminally refer Hillary Clinton, all of a sudden the shift goes to the Democrats. And that will give Donald Trump time to consolidate, take the camera off him for a while, because that will be a feeding frenzy. If there's a criminal referral, the feeding frenzy in the media will make Donald Trump's phenomena look like nothing. And he will just sit there and say, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And a lot of reporters who said it wouldn't happen are going to have egg in their face.
And Trump will be on the campaign trail. Let me read Article 4 in the recommendation for an indictment. The other thing is this, if I've seen polls that basically it's a statistical dead heat
Yeah.
between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, plus or minus 3%, and they haven't even gotten going yet. Now, if this scenario comes to pass that Hillary is either A, tainted, or B, indicted, or indicted and tried and convicted, what do the Democrats do? Well, you got Bernie Sanders, who's kind of out there from a political perspective, very, very, very left-wing, a socialist, but he's got 1,000 delegates. How do you tell him to go away?
You can't. That's my point. They're going to be in a worse pickle than the Republicans are in, because the Republicans will have had their bloodletting previously. And then you'll see a rallying effect of some kind around Trump. Yeah, there'll be people that'll never vote for him. But as if I've told Republicans, and I'm going to tell a bunch of folks in a speech tonight, if he wins the nomination fair and square, everybody get behind him. Don't go and take your toys and go home. Because if he wins, at least you can rise together. If he loses, like all the so-called experts think, it makes the rebuilding process easier if everybody was trying. If the Trump people ever feel that the establishment sat on their hands, it'll be like Goldwater 64. They'll say then to hell with the establishment, and their rebuilding effort will be that much more difficult.
What's really scary here from a national perspective, I think, Patrick, is that this is not just about, well, Jeb Bush was our guy, you're not Jeb Bush, we're not going to work for you. They're worried that the world that they live in is going to disintegrate under Donald Trump. There will be no establishment.
Well, establishments have a funny way of surviving. It's like the guy who was a Nazi during the war, and the Russians came in and they said, we're going to be running East Germany. Hey, I'm one of you guys.
Well, I don't think it's ever going to get to the point of violence, but, Robert E. Lee and his team, the Confederacy had a bunch of people, and that just was gone with the wind, as they say, too. And I think the government, as we know it, is going to be seriously retooled.
One of the things I'm starting to think about, I'm starting to think about a Donald Trump presidency.
Well, you weren't a couple of weeks ago.
No, I wasn't. But it's like the old story. If the winds are going a certain way, I want to see what can be done to. One, I'd like to make sure we salvage all the down ballot, or even win some more. But the other thing is, we've had presidents, even Republican presidents, who are cowards. George Bush is a nice guy, but he caved in as soon as he got a little pushback on domestic issues, mostly. It's the same thing with his father. Raise the taxes, or we're not going to pass the budget. Oh, gosh, I better raise taxes. So they just ran for the hills. Maybe Donald Trump is going to be the guy. You have Paul Ryan, they're totally opposite. Ryan is just a geek, right? He loves all this stuff, and he's good at it. Maybe he needs a Donald Trump to run interference for him, use another football analogy. Maybe Donald Trump comes through and says, this is what my guy Paul's going to do, and any of you guys that don't get in line, and then let him go harangue the Democrats. He might be the perfect guy to let Ryan then go this way, and he'd say, how dare those guys uphold that bill? Nowadays it's nice. I'm very disturbed that the opposition has decided to hold up this very important piece of legislation. Trump's going to go knock over the table and say, you better pass this bill or I'm coming down there.
Now, Trump has had a history, having been in New York, of dealing with liberal elites because, as Ted Cruz pointed out, that's where they live. And I came from the suburbs, but I know all about it. So Donald Trump can play nice with them in a business environment and a social environment. Can he do that with Congress? Could he sit there with a Harry Reid or whoever the next leader is going to be?
Yeah, and he's going to tell him to stuff it. Again, I'm starting to... I haven't quite come around completely. And, when you got a radio show, you don't want to endorse, because then once you endorse, half of the people don't like you and the other half think you're crazy. But I could see a totally different way. Maybe this whole, playing nice and using, $10 words and 18 phrases to say yes or no, maybe that's what we need. He might be just the guy to come in, and when Chuck Schumer comes down the White House, he goes, don't ever do that again. I heard what you said on the TV yesterday. If you don't watch it, I'm going to lay a Twitter barrage on you, and I'm going to bury you.
But meantime, they're actually friends. So
yeah, but we're friends. I know you, Chuck, but guess what? Now it's war.
Another historical reference, Harry Truman. FDR dies in Warm Springs, Georgia. Here's Harry Truman, a haberdasher from Missouri. Nobody gives him the time of day. Probably one of our greatest presidents. Had the chutzpah to do what he had to do to end the war in the Pacific Front. Took a lot of lives, but how many did he save? You could argue that all day long. But my point here is, could we be underestimating Donald Trump?
I think right now he's being judged by tradition. He's being judged by the traditions of how campaigns are run and the niceties of campaigns. And yes, it's all rough and tumble, but in the end, we're all pals. That's still true, I think, that last part. But for the rest of it, he's changing the whole way we run campaigns in this country. Look what he's got. He's got people paying attention. Either positively or negatively, they're paying attention to this campaign. Yes, there's new voters coming out. A lot of people say, well, yeah, but will he keep them? I don't know. I don't even care about that right now. I'm trying to figure out, one, can he do the job? Of course he can do the job. I don't even think that's a question. But to me, it's going to be funny to see, maybe we get somebody who's, all these stuff that has been, built up that Republicans want to do, maybe it just needs somebody to kick over the wall.
Well, think about this, folks. When we were growing up, computers were about the size of this room. They were big mainframes. Now they're on your wristwatch, right? We can order up a movie on our computer screen. We don't ride a horse to work. We drive a car. We don't take a mule across country. We fly a plane. Everything changes, and maybe the last bastion of change is our political system. Not the great constitutional system, but just the way things are run in Washington. Maybe power has to go back to the states. Maybe it's time for that Article 5, change a few amendments.
I think that win or lose, I think it's going to be great for Article 5, because imagine if Donald Trump got behind an Article 5 convention, just lending his voice.
For those of you who don't know it, and it is on our website, Article 5 is the constitutional provision that when the people think that things are a little bit out of hand, we can take things back. We get a majority of the states, 38 states, say yes, we'll consider it. Then we have a convention of the states, consider the amendments that are agreed upon, and there we go. It doesn't happen much because Congress usually gets wind of it and adjusts.
Right.
Like halftime.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be of the mind that I'm willing to let it work if it happens. Quite frankly, I think Donald Trump would be a much better president than Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz wouldn't get anything done. Chuck Schumer would come up and roll over him like a tank. The Republicans might have found a champion, and they might be getting used to the idea of somebody who's not willing to play by the rules. And in this case, having watched the system all these years, why not?
Well, we shall see. That's our Red Zone Alert this time around. We'll get back to you after the Indiana primary, which could be Trump's first and goal and the clock running out. I'm Ed Craig.
And I'm Patrick Dornson.